So good morning one and all. This is Sangeetha from CRC Department of SA Engineering College, Avadi, Chennai 77. So I am going to teach the topic about database management system for GATE coaching class. The small topic name called dirty read problem or write read conflict. It is a problem, we may call this as to be a write read conflict. So this problem when will occur means when one transaction updates an item, but due to some unconditional situation that the transaction fails. When some unconditional situation, the transaction fails, but before the transaction performs the rollback. So when some other transaction reads the updated value, but when it uncommitted the data. Second transaction, it takes its uncommitted data, so it creates an inconsistency in the database. So it creates a read-write conflict. There is a transaction between the T1 and T2. It creates a read-write conflict. This is called a read-write problem. For example, T1, this has to be a T2. So T1 which perform the read operation as R of X is equal to 200. So when it perform the commit, before commit, the transaction 2 which reads the 200 as its original value, but the transaction 1 does not give the commit that this has to be its final value. So before it's finalize the value, the transaction T2 which reads the value as 200, it updated in its database as a 200. So this will give a conflict called read-write conflict. So before that, the updation into that the T1, this T1 rollbacks this 200 as some other value as 100, but in the transaction T2 it only updates its value as 200, not as 100, but the transaction 1 which stay its value as 100 and gives the commitment here. Give its commitment as the 100 as its finalized value before rollback. That means this T1 transaction which rollback its value as 200. So the transaction 2 which reads its value as 200. This creates the dirty read problem. Okay, how we solve the dirty read problem means, so the same T1 and T2, the same T1 R of X is 200. So the transaction T2 which used to wait for some time, when the transaction 1 give as its commit. So after once the transaction 2 reads the commit as its finalized data, then only it updates the value as, then only give the commit as in this transaction 2, then only it will give the solution for the read-write problem. This one is the correct thing. This is a small steps for the data read problem. The first thing is the lost data problem can be illustrated with the following scenario. The same thing, the transaction T1 and T2. So here the same T1 and T2. So here the T1 which modifies the database record without commitmenting the values. The same thing, this 100 without commitment, and before commitment of this T1, here T2 update its value as 100 without the knowledge of commit of T1. So this will create the dirty read problem. So transaction T1 modifies the database record without committing the changes. So here it does not perform without committing, and T2 reads the uncommitted data immediately when it updates its value without commit as its value, as its query. So immediately T2 updates its value as 100. So immediately T1 performs a rollback as this is not 100. So instead of 100, it give as a 200. But T2, which does not know about the thing, that T1 which rollbacks change its value as a 200. So in the transaction database, T2 which reads the value as 100 only. So this will create the inconsistency in the database. So due to this situation only, it is called a dirty read problem. So again, T2 has already read the uncommitted data for the T1, which is no longer valid one. Already it creates its 100. So after commit only it performs its 200. So that the T2 after commit query only the T2 it has to take as a 200 here. This only correct. So before it perform the commit, if it take its value as 200 as its uncommitted value, means this will create a conflict. This is a gate question, CS 2022 gate question. The question number 39, that question should be asked from a database management system. The question come under the same dirty read problem. So you have to find out the given schedule, that means they are giving the 4 different types of transactions with the read and the write operation, in which transaction perform its first and which one is the next and all. So you have to find out based upon that the dirty read problem. You have to find out the continuation of the transaction. So in that, this is a read operation. This one is a read operation and this one is a write operation, where they are performing the 2 different operations and perform in the transactions, different types of transactions. This I representing as a number of transactions, and this has to be your schedule. So just kindly see that R4 of X read of 4th. So this 4 representing as a 4th transaction, it performed the read operation, and R2 of X again it performed the read operation in the transaction 2, and this one is R3 of X, it again perform its read operation in the transaction 3, and this one is the R1 of Y, it performed the read operation in the transaction 1, as likewise W1 of Y, W2 of X and W3 of Y and R4 of Y. You have to find out the serial schedules in the conflicts equivalent to the schedule. So these are all the options. So you have to find out which one is A option is correct, or B option is correct, or C option is correct, and or D option is correct. You have to find out that. So here you have to give this has to be T1, T2, T3, T4, because this I representing as a 4 transaction, so that's why I'm keeping here as a transaction 1, transaction 2, transaction 3 and transaction 4. So you have to read out the according to the order. So first one is transaction 4 perform its read operation, so that you have to give this has to be a transaction R4 of X here, and then R2. So you have to give it in the second row, that means the transaction 2, so that R2 of X, and next one is R3 of X. So go to the transaction 3 and you have to perform here as R3 of X, and R1 of Y. So here you are representing as a 4th term, R1 of Y, and what is the next one is the W1 of Y. It is immediate perform the write operation in the same transaction W1. So that W1 of Y, and next is your W2, that is go to the second transaction this has to be a W2 of X, and then go to the third transaction which perform the right operation. So next to this, the term SW3 of Y, and again go to the last one, that is here it performed same R4 of Y. So we need to find out the serial schedules of this conflict. Here it performs some of the read write problem there is also, but you have to find out which transaction is scheduled as a first and which one is second and which one is third and which one is fourth. So before that we have to find out the relationship between these transactions and all. Which transaction is scheduled as a first and which one is a next and next and next. So we have to find out that first. So that here R1 of Y, and you have to find out that where the R with the Y, respect of that Y is there. So R1 of Y and W1 of Y which perform its read operation and write operation in the same transaction. So here there is no conflict because it performs its read operation and immediate with the write operation. So that you have to find out where it should be connection, where it should be relationship between the different transactions and all. So you have to find out that where the Y item is available in the different transaction, so that only perform its operation as the same thing. So here R1 of Y, so R1 of Y means, so you have to take out this item as a Y. So R1 of Y means where the read operation with Y or write operation with Y, so you have to relate that transaction as the first thing. So transaction 1 with that the transaction 3. Yes, so the R1 of Y which related with that the W3 of Y. Again the same R1 of Y which also related with that the R4 of Y also, because item number Y is also performed in the transaction 4. So that T1 which representing as a T3 as well as the T4. So before that we have to give the prevalence graph. So how many number of transactions available here? T1, T2, T3 and T4. So that here the transaction 1 which should be related with the transaction 3 and to transaction 4. So that here you have to give this has to be a transaction 3 and the transaction 4. Next, so here prevalence graph, it does not perform its own loop, so that's why we keep with the next transaction. So again we move to that T2 perform the operation, read operation as well as a write operation. Which one is performed in that, you have to find out that. So that with the respect of that X, so same item number where it performed that. So that the R2 of X is the item. So this item which should be performed with that T3 as well as the T4. So that you have to note it down as T2 with the T3, T2 with T3 and then T2 with the T4. And here the T3 with respective of that the T2 also. So here we have drawn the prevalence graph here. So with the help of this prevalence graph we have to find out the serial schedules with the conflict one. So this is a method which I already drawn in the terms of R1. So transaction T1 which contains the Y items, read operation as well as a write operation, and with the T2 which are again perform the read operation with the write operation, and R3 which perform the transaction 3 which perform the read operation as well as the W3 operation, and here the T4 it performed the R4 operation. This is the prevalence graph. So option A is the correct one. Option A is the first one because the transaction 1 which perform its operation with transaction with T3 as well as the T4. So already we visited the T3 and the T4, and then So the transaction T1 is the first schedule, because in that transaction first only getting that read operation as well as the write operation as a continuously. So that first one is the T1, and next we have to move with that the transaction with the T3. So next one is T3, and the next operation, so next transaction which will be moved to the T4. After that only finally the transaction 2 which is available, and last only we used to go to that the transaction 2. So T1 and then T3 and then T4, then finally our T2. So this is our dirty read problem, and this is the answer for that serial conflicts. And what about the remaining second option B, and option B, option C and option D means? So you have to know the remaining things, what will be happen to the remaining options also. So options B, here it perform with the dirty read problem. Why? Because read out that operation B, dirty read problem, here W3 of Y and W4 of Y. So it perform its read operation as well as write operation without give any commitment. So uncommitted values only read out with that the write of Y and read of Y. So option 3, dirty read problem, that option C also perform the dirty read problem, the same problem which is available here also, because it also perform that uncommitted data value. And go to the option 4, this option 4 which defines that last update problem, which will be continued in the next class. Number 2. Consider the following statements about schedules in database. Here they are giving the 3 different statements. So you have to find out which statement is the correct one and which statement is the incorrect one, and is there any reason behind the statements means. So you have to know the thing about for the all GATE exams. So for that you have to read out the first statement. So first statement is the correct one or incorrect one, you have to find out that. So that S1 is a data. So first statement is a dirty read problem is the same as write read conflict. Yes, because dirty read problem is also otherwise called as a write read conflict. And come to the S2, and this is another one problem which is called the unrepeatable problem. Unrepeatable reads is also known as read write conflict. Yes, this is also a correct one. S3, this is statement 3 which gives as the statement strict two-phase locking may have the read-write conflict. No, definitely not. This is not the correct one. So this one is the correct and this one is the correct. So you have to find out that the answer which one is correct means only S1 and S2 is the correct answer. Because dirty read problem is called as a write read conflict, and unrepeatable reads is also called as a read write conflict. But the third statement is incorrect one. This is not performing as a read write conflict. So you have to give the answer as the first one, S1 and S2. Only S1 and S2 both are correct, and the S3 is wrong one. Thank you. We'll continue in the next class.